everybody. It's your girl, Audreyonna Sequale, and I am the host of Strong Friends In podcast. If you're new here, if you're not familiar with me, this podcast is all about mental health and the ways it affects us in the areas of career, relationships, and every single way we live our lives. So, listen, you guys, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and just dive on into the show. I have two really great guests with me tonight. First, I want to introduce Dr. Jeffrey Ann Wilder.
Hey.
Hey there. And I also want to introduce Maya Williams.
Hello.
Hey, and ladies, I'm going to let you take the floor for a second and just introduce yourself very briefly. We can start with you, Dr. Wilder.
Well, hey everyone, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Ann Wilder. I am a sociologist by training, race, gender, diversity scholar. I am all things Black and Black wellness, particularly all things Black women. I'm really excited to be on the podcast this evening, and I can't wait to jump into our discussion.
Awesome. And Miss Williams.
Hello, I am Maya Williams. I am currently a senior at Florida A&M University studying in psychology. I consider myself a mental health advocate. I'm all about self-care and self-awareness. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here and share this opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. So if you're familiar with the show, there's usually a segment that I do before we go ahead and jump into the topic. But in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and dive head first. So tonight's topic, you guys, is something that I have wanted to explore literally since the inception of this podcast a whole year ago. Like, congratulations on a whole year, yay! But this is something that I wanted to explore, and I'm so glad that I have the guests that I have tonight so that we can even just scratch the surface of this topic. So what I want to introduce to us tonight is the topic of racial trauma, and not just racial trauma, but how racial trauma can get passed on through generations, through our DNA. So that sounds crazy, right? So listen, you guys, there's a little bit of science behind how this happens. I'm going to try and break it down for you as best as I can. So first, I have to give you the literal definition of epigenetics. What is epigenetics? So the science of epigenetics, it's the study of changes in organisms caused by modification of gene expression rather than the alteration of the genetic code itself. So for those of you who heard me say that and felt like it was a lot of gibberish, which it kind of is, and you're like me and you usually get your news from pop culture sources like Teen Vogue, I'm going to tell you what their definition of epigenetics is and how this study kind of came to be. So according to an article in Teen Vogue from 2016, so there's been some research about epigenetics over some time. Dr. Rachel Yehuda, who's an Israeli professor, she's a professor of psychiatry at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. She found that trauma can affect our genes, right? Our genes, our genetic makeup, our DNA, right? So what she did is she tested a small group of Holocausters and found that they had a similar hormonal profile to Vietnam veterans who were suffering from PTSD. So what that means is sociologically, we can pass stress and trauma through our genes to the next generation. So racially, most of the people who are watching and listening are Black. Shout out to maybe my few, other listeners. How y'all doing? But for those of us that know, we have been through slavery. We've been through Jim Crow, mass incarceration, now police brutality. Our people have been through so much, and it is very possible, science says, that we are able to transmit that racial trauma through our bloodlines. So compound the trauma of simply being Black in America or Black across the diaspora, because listen, anti-Blackness is global, right? So compound that with what personal traumas you may have in your life, and it can get really sticky when it comes to processing trauma in our body. So with all that being said, and with the science kind of sort of underway, I wanted to make it as simple as possible for those of you who are listening. I want to get to tonight's discussion. So I want to ask both of you ladies, do you believe that you've experienced racial trauma?
I'll kick it off if that's okay. Absolutely. I mean, you can't be, as you said, you can't be Black in America or Black in the world without having that ancestral history that is mapped onto your experience. I wish it weren't true, but if we look at American history, we've seen the Black struggle be just that. And we have persevered in spite of, but absolutely. I mean, we're in this moment in time right now in the 21st century where we're experiencing the modern civil rights movement, you know, and all the civil unrest connected to George Floyd's death. And as you were talking, I thought about the research around Black maternal mortality.
Yeah.
So Black women are first of all, the United States has a really high maternal mortality rate. So that means that women in the United States are dying within a year of giving birth at much higher rates compared to everyone else around the world, whether that's a developed country, underdeveloped, you know, first world, whatever. Black women, those rates for Black women are so much higher. And even if Black women aren't dying in childbirth, they are predisposed to give birth to children a lot earlier. So their likelihood of going to not having that preterm labor is directly because of racism, right? So not only does it get passed down, it gets passed down through the womb.
Right.
I know that happens. So it's sad, it's tragic, but I'm so glad we're talking about it because the science definitely supports that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maya,
I definitely can. I've dealt with the level of racial related trauma, especially now in the 21st century. In this past, like during the COVID-19 epidemic and things that's been going on, as I'm watching different things on social media and watching police brutality and police, you know, holding us down and killing us, it definitely has a whirlwind of anxiety, fear. I have moments where I don't go to work, I don't want to leave my house, and it's just created a sense of, like I said, fear, and it's very hard to sometimes deal with the Black community. Have to, you know, learn how to start peeling back our layers because our trauma is very multi-layered.
Right. I totally agree. I think that I too have experienced racial trauma, and I think when people think about trauma, they think about, you know, something that literally caused you to go and hide in a corner somewhere, right? Because you're that afraid. But I just think of even the small things like, you know, driving down the interstate and then all of a sudden you see a cop behind you and you know, merge into the next lane, you know, for fear of, okay, if they're behind me, they see something that's going to stop me, then you kind of already in your mind have played out that situation and what could happen, what we've seen happen before. So it's even just, you know, the smallest things like that I can think of that make me realize, you know, yeah, I have been through something or my people have been through something. And when I think about it, it kind of brings up, you know, an emotion in me. And it is sad. I think what I'm saying, it really is sad. But it's something that I'm wondering, can it be healed or what can we do about it? But we're going to get to that in just a little bit. Now, going back to what you were saying, Dr. Wilder, because I want you to know, I remember that study. For those of you who don't know and are listening, Dr. Wilder was actually my sociology professor at the University of North Florida. And to be honest, that study was what made me ask you to do the podcast. Because
really?
I am about almost like 4 years out of college, but I still remember that because it was that impactful.
Yeah.
And it's a frightening statistic. It's very sad, but it's something that stuck with me throughout my college career. So I wanted to ask you, in what ways have Black people faced systemic racial trauma?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, what in particular about the study that makes it so riveting, and also, you know, when I used to teach in the college classroom, why I had to make sure that I made it part of the curriculum regardless of what I was teaching, is because we're told, right, part of the American narrative is this idea of rugged individualism, right? And this notion of a meritocracy, right? So, you know, I've been streaming Hamilton with my 8-year-old daughter for the past couple of weeks, right? And so you kind of see this notion of like, you know, the American story is really built on this idea of if you just work hard enough, right, you can achieve whatever you want. That's flat out wrong, right, when it comes to us and other minorities. So this study around preterm labor for Black women showed that education, income, your zip code, none of those things explain it away, right? So it is so shocking because the study shows that Black women with the highest levels of education, so someone like me with a PhD and a middle class income and living in the, you know, the best of the best neighborhoods, they were still more likely to not make it to preterm birth and labor just because they're Black, because the cumulative impact of racism, right? And, you know, regardless of what we do and what our job is and where we went to school or if we went to school, we still have to experience racism, right? That cumulative impact is deeply embedded in the womb, and we're passing that on to our children in utero, right? And what the study also found was that white women with no college education, right? The rates of preterm labor for white women with no college education, just a high school diploma, those rates were higher. So the likelihood of white women who had just had high school diplomas carrying children to full term, those rates were higher than Black women like me with a PhD, whatever. And I had my daughter when I was 35. You can't explain that away other than to say racism, right? Systemic racism, yeah.
And it makes me think of, you know, we've heard stories from Serena Williams, we've heard stories from Beyonce, wealthy, larger than life Black women who you assume could have the very best health care, who can, have the best doctors, and they were still telling stories about how they were close to dying in childbirth. And it's just like, well, damn, if it can happen to Beyonce, it can sure enough happen to me. You know? And we're hearing more and more stories about women dying in childbirth. There was, I think she was a YouTube influencer. I can't think the young lady's name, but, you know, God bless her. She just passed away in childbirth. And it seems like there is no other way, like you're saying, to explain it other than racism.
And healthcare workers don't take us seriously when we're complaining about pain. The research also shows that healthcare providers think that we have a higher threshold for pain. Go figure, right? What's the name of this podcast, right? We have this notion of like strong Black women that we can kind of get through it all, regardless of what we get put through, we can still manage it all. And that ends up having some really intense consequences for us when we have some type of health problem, because doctors don't pay attention to us. We're complaining about something and they just don't pay attention.
Absolutely. Do you think there are other ways? Well, not things we know that there are other ways, you know, other than in healthcare that, you know, that systemic trauma is being drummed up in us as a culture?
In the workplace.
Just if you guys did not touch it, listen to my last episode featuring the ladies of full-time Black women, and yes, we dove into that pretty well, but please continue. Yeah,
in the workplace, and I know Maya's probably experienced some of the same things too. I feel like she was kind of saying that, you know, the beginning of introducing herself. I mean, just in the workplace, and typically, you know, Black women, we are pretty damn magical. We do very well. We we thrive in spite of, and we end up in a lot of times being the only Black faces in a lot of white spaces. And because of that in and of itself creates this unique and distinctive level of trauma and toxicity that is attached to being an only. I mean, you alluded to, me being your professor. I was a professor for 10 years at this institution, achieved tenure, did all this great stuff. And I walked away from it 2 years ago because I was tired of being in a toxic environment that where I experienced tons of racism because I did not see other people who look like me at the faculty ranks. So, that stuff will literally kill you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maya, can you speak to that as well? Facing, traumas maybe in the workplace or in other areas of your life?
I've definitely, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I definitely dealt with, well, not necessarily personally, but I definitely acknowledge that come in the workplace. I have the luxury to work with majority of black people, so I see our faces today, and we're able to share that in the workplace, especially in the medical fields and systems. It's frightening. It's very frightening. Honestly, up to the hospital by myself just because of the trauma that we go through to the hospital. And I remember when my sister was pregnant, having my niece and out all day, every day, because I just was not going to allow her to be in the hospital by her, because it's crazy how black kids and black babies are being killed because doctors are even the pain. So yeah, I definitely acknowledge the different traumas that are going through some of the different systems.
Yeah,
it's frightening.
Definitely. I think probably, aside from police brutality, I think racism in the healthcare system is becoming, more and more at the forefront. And, how we're talking about racial trauma being passed down through generations, I just think of, the history of gynecology. I think of the Tuskegee experiment. I think of all of the ways that Black people have been used as basically guinea pigs, for the advancement of science. I think of Henrietta Lacks, still using her cells to this day. You know what I mean? And there's this, I won't say a myth because it's true that, Black people, especially older Black people, don't like going to the doctor. And those are the reasons why. Because we've been through those types of things, in our lifetimes. And so it just kind of reinforces that idea that, the way that we go about things, the way our culture is, it doesn't just derive out of nowhere. This is something that's been ingrained in us. This is something that we've seen over time. It's something that might keep happening, throughout different generations. And I really have no other way to say it than it sucks. It sucks.
Well, have you guys thought about, I mean, obviously we're dealing with a pandemic and we already know that we are being impacted by the pandemic at disproportionate rates compared to our white counterparts. But, it's funny because I'm one of those Black people that will get my flu shot like clockwork. Like, oh, it's time for me to go get my flu shot. And people are like, girl, you crazy getting that flu shot. I know somebody who died of the flu, and it's just like, listen, if I don't get my flu shot, I get the flu. So I'm getting my flu shot. But we're starting to see this very thing now when it comes to these trials for coronavirus vaccines, right? I've asked a lot of people, hey, when the vaccine comes out, are you going to get it? And what are Black people saying?
No.
No. And, to be honest, I'm not really sure if I'm going to be in the line at Walgreens trying to get my vaccine. I think I may just wait a little bit, right? Like when they open things back up, especially down here in Florida, y'all go ahead first and see what happens. Then we'll, kind of see. So, we're still seeing that today.
Yeah, 100%, because I am a Black person who will not get my flu shot because of reasons like that. And
it's a lot of Black folks who won't get a flu shot. It's a lot of y'all.
Yeah. I mean, I will get a COVID vaccine, but like you said, let me let that first batch go ahead and let's see what happens, and then maybe, I'll go ahead and get mine.
Yeah, 2025. For me, like, I'll get my flu vaccine, but for COVID, I may have to wait till like 2025 before I start getting it on the regular.
Those
Yeah.
ingredients or whatever it is
Yeah.
first.
Yes.
But
yeah.
Moving the conversation along, you guys, and now we're kind of switching over to Maya and giving you a little bit more of the floor, because I know you're a psychology student, so this is your thing. So I really wanted to know, in what ways has experiencing and watching racism over and over and over impacted our mental health? Because I feel like since the death of Trayvon Martin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since then, it's like Black death has been caught on camera.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's caught on camera, it's put on social media on a loop. Put on social media, put on the news, and you can just watch somebody dying over and over and over again. People have to put trigger warnings on their social media to be like, hey, can you not? I don't want to see somebody, getting kneeled on for nearly 9 minutes and die in front of me. I could go my whole life without seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think, the prevalence of even beyond just the real life videos, there's shows, movies that are always, somehow incorporating what's going on today, but it's always Black pain. So how do you think that affects us mentally?
When we're constantly looking at anything negative when it deals with the mind, it creates a cycle. So when we're constantly seeing those things on media about, police brutality, and police put his knee in a person's neck, and, just take their lives, even to the point you're hearing their last breath, and seeing those different things is literally opening generational wounds for Black people, especially when we're talking about our trauma, because our trauma dates back from, slavery. So even if you're not dealing with that right now, you're literally just a womb, and when you open a wound, like I said, our trauma is multi-layered. So you may be dealing with something at home, or you dealing with something at school, literally piles on top. So when we're talking about the mind and these toxic cycles, it creates depression, it increases, stress. And when you get into talking about stress levels and it being elevated, you're also talking about different onsets of different diseases in the Black diabetes, high blood pressure. And so we have to be careful, and we have to realize that we can't always, watch the news, or we can't always scroll through our social media as that. We have to also take care of our health, our mental wellness. And I know during this past time with the protests and all the different killings that was going on, I had to take a break of social media, and I'm very active on social media. I post pretty much every day, but it just wasn't my mental health. So yeah.
I totally agree with that. I don't want to say that this particular era or moment of racial unrest was the tipping point for me, because all of it's bad. All of it is bad. All of it is evil. All of it is something that I wish was not a reality. But I don't know what it was about this particular time, but I knew that I was being affected by it, because I am a person who stays on social media. Most of the time, if I'm not posting, I'm just seeing what's going on. And if I'm honest, I get most of my news from Twitter. I'm sorry, but Twitter is like the most reliable news source out there. It just is. It just really is. And, just watching everything unfold. And even though it was informative, I was learning a lot. There's a lot of great people that I follow with a bunch of really great talking points. I knew that I was being affected when I couldn't sleep. It was like 2 or 3 nights in a row where I was up until the sun came up. Like, I'm literally watching the sun come up, and I knew something was off, because if it's one thing Audreyonna Sequale is gonna do, she gonna sleep. Okay,
Right.
there has nary been a problem that a shut eye couldn't fix, but it was like with this, there was nothing I could do, and I was like, well, I want to stay informed. I need to know what's going on, especially in our city in Jacksonville, Florida. There were a lot of really great organizations that were putting forth effort and doing the work and having protests. I wanted to stay involved, but I was just like, I can't, because this is affecting me in a way that I have not seen before. We've been through this over the years, but it's just something about this particular time. I just couldn't deal with it. And, it's so interesting, because it's like, you want to feel like you're doing something. You want to feel like you're speaking out. If you're a person with a platform, even, someone who's starting their platform, and if you're a Black person, it's almost like you have to say something. But mentally, I just checked out. And I'm glad that you said what you said, Maya, because I think we do need to encourage people to, log off or unplug when
Yeah.
they need to. I don't think a lot of that is happening. I think because we've become so accustomed to the trauma that we just keep going and we don't process. And that eventually leads to, health problems seen and unseen, like how you were saying. So with that, do you think there's a way to treat racial trauma?
Um, Now this question, this was very hard to, really break down, because
Yeah.
like I said earlier, racial trauma, it literally dates back 400 plus years. But I think
Hmm.
talking about treatment, we have to first acknowledge the fact that we are hurting, the fact that, we do have mental illnesses, and we have to start working on the stigmas within our community when
Hmm.
dealing with mental disorder. It's a part of our culture to kind of dismiss. When you see the drunk uncle at the cookouts, to kind of just, pass him by, or just, look his
Hmm.
way and keep going, or just get and laugh, but not really discuss that every time you see him, he's drunk or he's smoking.
Right.
What? So I think we can't treat anything if we know it in the Black community really don't acknowledge it. So
Hmm.
we first have to acknowledge it. And then secondly, we have to educate. We have to start educating ourselves about ourselves, and really get to the root of our, because when you look at the educational system, we're being miseducated. We're
Hmm.
not in our, and the little that we are getting, there's, bits and pieces, or things lie, or we're hearing different lies, things, and it's because of the systems out there. They don't want us to be intelligent. They don't want us to be
Hmm.
smart, because deep inside they know the power that Black people hold, and when we're all
Right.
together, very powerful. So we have to educate, ourselves, and then we have to check the environments they're in. And this kind of goes back to my first point of acknowledging it. You have to make sure you're in an environment that you're able to have
Mhm.
these conversations, are able to begin the healing process. But you can't do that if you don't know it to be a problem.
Absolutely. Dr. Waller, do you have anything to add really quick?
I do, and I hate to stir this pot, and I'm the old one here, but I'm about to drop 6 names that have been in the media very recently, and I think we need to connect these names to racial trauma. Ready?
Hmm.
Kanye West,
Come on.
Will Smith,
Mm.
Jada Pinkett, Megan Thee Stallion, and
Hmm.
Tory Lanez. Right?
Hmm.
Okay, so that's 5, not 6. But if you think about what has happened in these stories in the
Hmm.
media just in the past week or two,
Right.
all of these things are connected to racial trauma,
Hmm.
right? Kanye's Twitter rants about
Yes.
white supremacy and the Kardashians and,
Hmm.
Chris Jong Un and all that, that's connected to racial trauma,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Will Smith and Jada's entanglement with August. I mean, that's connected to racial trauma that has not been healed,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And then, I just read, I don't know how true this is, but like Tory Lanez apparently shot Megan because she was beating up on him because he saw her, flirting with Kylie Jenner, right? So this notion of abuse within that's all racial trauma, all of that. So, I think, being the popular culture person that I am too, I think it's important for us to think about that because okay, here's the sixth one, Tamar Braxton, right?
Oh, yeah.
All of that because she apparently was upset and distraught about the way in which her family was being portrayed and manipulated as Black people on the broader screen and in the media.
Yeah.
That's all racial trauma. So I think it's important that when we're looking at, and everyone's talking about entanglements and this and that, and did Kim really sleep with Meek Mill? And we don't really give it, I don't care. Right. But I do think it's important for us to think about when these things are happening to celebrities or just everyday people, that are uncle at the cookout who always high. You need to think about how that's connected to racial trauma for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even more than that, we need to, I feel like in order to conquer your demons, you have to, one, give them a name.
Yes.
And I don't think that, a lot of people have attributed, what it is that they're going through or what they're feeling to a trauma, any trauma, racial or otherwise. I don't think people are necessarily able to attribute it to that. But even in just, the list of names that you just gave, I plan on talking about Kanye because I try as much as possible, but I wanted to talk about Kanye for a really long time. He does have, he's been formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Absolutely. We know that he has that history of mental illness. But then, as he's going on this rant and he's kind of saying some of the things about the Kardashians that other Black people have been saying for a long time. And it's just like, okay, so he does see it. You see it. It may take, this manic state for you to really come out and say what it is that you want to say. But, it affects our lives in so many different ways. Our relationships, our romantic relationships, how we're talking about, what happened with Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez allegedly, or what happened with Jada Pinkett and Will. And, Jada spoke openly about, wanting to feel better from that, I don't have no other word for it, but entanglement. And, wanting to feel like she could heal herself and heal somebody else. Or, Tamar Braxton, like you were saying, she doesn't like how she's being portrayed, how her family's being portrayed as Black women by WeTV, which is the station that the Braxton Family Values comes on. And, it affects so many different areas of our lives. And I don't think that we're realizing it. I don't think that in the run of a day, a lot of us really think about our mental health. I don't think that, I won't say we don't take it seriously, but I just think for such a long time, and that's a part of our trauma too, that these things aren't discussed openly. Black folks aren't really the ones to seek help. We're not really the ones to, head straight to the psychiatrist or the psychologist when something goes wrong. We've been taught, what happens in the house stays in the house. We've been told to pray about it. And, I'm happy to have this platform so that I can say, all that's well and good, but some help is needed on the end of this, some real help from a real professional. But it begins with giving it a name. It begins with realizing, what, I got a pattern here and I don't really like it. I want to change it, but I don't know how. I feel sad at times. I feel angry. I feel this. I feel that. Maybe I should talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
And so, I think going back to what Maya was saying, we all have that uncle or that family member that acts out, or that friend, that person in our life that acts out. And a lot of times we don't know why, even they might not know why, but, it can go back to traumas. And we process our traumas differently. We all do. So, treating racial trauma mentally, I agree with you, Maya. I think that might be tougher for a lot of people because they don't know. I think once they agree to seek help, maybe is something that can be addressed or worked on. But, even broader than, treating it within ourselves, Dr. Wilder, do you think there's a way that we can treat racial trauma as a society?
Sure, I think so. But I think, what you touched on just a bit ago is really important. This notion of naming it, that's important. And then just the folklore attached to, seeking help and therapy and that kind of thing. I was talking to a friend of mine today who was literally saying, gosh, I'm overwhelmed. I need help. I'm burnt out. I'm feeling resentful. And I said, okay, this is really great that you've named it, but you need to go to therapy. And she said, oh, no, I don't need to do that. Right. I mean, I just think there's something attached to the mythology of therapy in the Black community. Like, oh, that's a white people's problem. So in order for us, I think there are tons of resources, especially now and I know Maya can probably speak better to this than I can. There's tons of resources that professionals have connected to being culturally sensitive and, dealing with racial trauma. I mean, that's a commonly used term in, in the psych world. You know what I mean? That, scholars definitely understand like racially sensitive trauma, dealing with things related to trauma. But before we get to that point, there needs to be this widespread acknowledgement of members in the Black community that, as you said, therapy is not a bad thing. I mean, I'm constantly refuting this mythology that, you don't need that, or you have to really be crazy, or, like it's a horrible thing to actually, I would rather someone go to therapy than call me every day talking my ear off, because that attacks my own self-care. As a strong friend, right? Go and sit on someone's couch or do it virtually and connect with a professional, as opposed to unloading and dumping on people all the time who you think can take it, because, that wears on us too.
I totally agree. Really quick, something that Dr. Wilder just touched on, in your training to become, a future psychologist or psychiatrist, because Lord knows that we need more Black faces, men
all
and
of them.
women. I would like to ask, is there anything in your studies that, talks to being racially sensitive, and being able to, and especially for not just people of color, but for, all therapists. All therapists need to, be racially sensitive. But is there anything that you've come across or anything that you've studied to kind of help facilitate that a little bit more?
I've definitely taken a class, and it was actually crisis intervention, and we learned about the love of, and one important piece when it's to therapy, say just when you are a Black person to therapy, you also have to remember that we are, very there's not that many Black clinicians, and the problem is when Black people do get to the point of seeking therapy and they don't, or they're not talking to somebody that understands them, or don't have these different, or don't follow the theories that were rooted in Black, not Black, but and those things, it becomes hard to go to therapy. So that's why I encourage, Black people to find Black therapists and find Black clinicians. But we do learn a lot about cultural competence and being able to take on bias picture, and we learn about different ways to, the language barrier, not just with Black people, but people Asian and different things like that. We have to learn how to understand how language plays a part in therapy. And so there are different things we learn in class and, in becoming a clinician when it comes to mental health. That's very important to connecting with your clients.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Dr. Wilder, do you still have to leave us soon?
I do. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Listen, you have given us so much. A good bang for your buck. I enjoyed having you here. When I thought about this conversation, I was like, the first person I'm going to call is Dr.
Oh.
Wilder. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to continue the conversation with Maya. But before you leave, please tell the listeners and the people who are watching how to contact you.
Well, you can find out more about me on my not so updated website, but you can still find out about me there, jeffreyann.com. You can reach me on Twitter at jeffreyannw. That is my Twitter handle. And I am very, very resistant for any other social media like Instagram and whatnot. But maybe one of these days I'll get on that. But until then, that's the best way to contact me. I have truly enjoyed being a part of this conversation. Audreyonna Sequale, I am so proud of you and the platform that you have. And I please hope that you have me on again in the very near future.
Of course, of course. And I need a great sociological perspective. I know.
I'm your girl. I'm your girl. It was so great joining this conversation with you as well. And good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
All right. And hey, Henny, I saw Henny in the chat somewhere. So, hey, girl.
Oh, hey.
Yes. I don't know if she's still on, but I saw her chatting out saying hey. So,
hey, everybody who's watching right now. I can't really type back, but thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much again, Dr. Wilder, and I really enjoyed having you.
All right, y'all stay safe, wash your hands, mask up.
Yes, absolutely. Same to you.
All right, bye.
All right, y'all. So we're going to carry on this conversation with Maya, and what I want to move into next. We've talked about all the ways that, racial trauma has affected us culturally. We've talked about how it affects us mentally, but trauma also affects us in our bodies. And one of the things that I know that I have noticed, for those of you who don't know much about me, this may be your first time listening, watching, whatever. The reason I even started this platform last year was because I was formally diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And I came to know that by seeing a therapist. I felt like it was time in my life. I felt like, I was spinning my wheels with nowhere to go, and somebody had to tell me something. So I went to my therapist and I got diagnosed. It took me a while to finally, get medicated. But now that I feel better than I once did. I think I know what peace is now. And that's just one of the ways in which, like we said, giving a name to it, finding the help that you need, and really doing the work to, help yourself feel better, all of that, when it's in alignment, makes you a better person. But there are still ways that I can feel certain traumas in my body, whether it's racial trauma, whether it's personal trauma, things that have happened to me. And I know for me that I hold trauma in my body. I hold it in my neck and shoulders. There are certain parts of me that tense up when I'm in what I call a flight or fight situation. And I know that, as Black people, when we are put in those situations where, we feel like something may happen to us, for example, when I went to a protest here in downtown Jacksonville, just having to kind of be on alert the whole time and make sure that, nothing happens or nothing goes left, things like that. Or like I was saying earlier, when the cop is behind you on the interstate and you got to go over into the next lane. So Maya, I know that racial trauma affects the mind, of course, but, are there other ways that it can affect our bodies?
Definitely, for sure, especially like you mentioned, anxiety. Anxiety has a physical aspects. We're talking increased heartbeat, heart rate, sweating, even feeling of like faintness and different things like that. And you feel that in your body. And just like you were saying, the whole tension and stress where you hold it in your bodies. I definitely hold it in my neck area, and it gets very tense. And I know, like, when I even get pulled over by a cop, heart starts racing,
Yep.
things start, can't even think right. Your
Yeah.
thoughts and everything scattered, and it's crazy, but you definitely feel it, and it's real.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, I'm trying to even think of, just other situations, kind of racially charged situations where I feel that way. But I think, um, I don't know if everybody who's listening or watching used to watch Orange is the New Black, but it's just one of the examples to me that, like I said, even just outside of reality, there's TV shows that are somehow incorporating parts of Black pain. And well, I'm gonna spoil it anyway, because I mean, if you ain't seen it by now, then like I don't know what you're doing. But at the end of one of the seasons, maybe 3 or 4, something like that, one of the characters is killed by one of the correctional officers kneeling on her. That's all I'm gonna say. Y'all can figure out who died. Okay, go watch it on Netflix. But that's how one of the characters died, and I remember being upset personally because it was a character that I loved for one, and then two, I was like, well, damn. Now I have to not only consume this in real life, but I have to consume this, in my media that I choose to watch. This is something that, I go to watch to make me feel better. I like this show, and now here it is. You know what I mean? And I remember in watching that scene, I just tensed up. Like, I remember I started to cry, and I was just like, I didn't ask for this today. But it's that feeling, even though I know good and well that character got up and walked away offset when it was all over with. I know that the person who, kneeled on her didn't do it intentionally and they weren't trying to. I know all of that. But those emotions still flood back because of what we've seen so many times over and over again. And I just don't I don't like having those feelings, due to me just being a Black woman in America, on top of the other things that cause me to have my anxiety. It's kind of like, if anybody else out there is dealing, with a mental illness, it's like, having that racial trauma and then whatever else just building up, just like compounding on top of that. And it can be really tough. That's about
Right.
the best way I can put it. It can be really, really tough. So what I want to ask you, Maya, is, kind of covered it before, but are there any ways that you are able to kind of just like come back into yourself and, give yourself that self-care that you need in order to not feel this way, or, to kind of just plug and, get all of the craziness out of your mind?
There are definitely ways, and I think we have to start embracing them more. And
Mm,
so realizing that something that may work for one person may not work for you. So I always, one thing that works for me is journaling. I'm
oh,
on
yeah.
a
Mhm,
of self awareness and learning about myself more. And every time something happens and I feel sad or I feel angry about it, I always journal about it, and that has helped me to learn about myself and become aware. And also, it's nothing wrong with taking a break, going to do things that you
mhm.
enjoy, out with people that bring you joy. Of course, now,
Yeah.
and that's why a lot of are experiencing depression and stuff, is because now
Mhm,
we aren't really able to go out and hang out with the friends, and that in and of itself, just going out and thinking about, oh, I may catch a illness or whatever, that starts our anxiety and things of that nature, and that doesn't really stem from other types of racial trauma
mhm.
per se. And so it can, it just gets very intense. But I think when
Right.
it comes to caring, we just have to, find ways that work with us, find ways that release our stress and tension in our body, go
Mhm,
take a bubble bath, things of that nature. Go call your homegirls, have girl talk,
mhm.
things of
Yeah,
that nature.
yeah. All of that good stuff. Yeah, like you said, now with COVID just running rampant throughout the entire country, it's so much harder, to have that face-to-face interaction because we as human beings just need that. Um,
Right.
but I think some really good like COVID approved ways that I've tried to kind of wind down, especially in this era is one, journaling. Like you said, journaling will save a life. I always tell people, if you somehow have some type of barrier to therapy, whether it's cost, insurance, what have you, journaling is the next best thing to me. Journaling helps. The way we were just saying that, trauma gets stored up in your body and, you feel your muscles get tense wherever it is you hold tension. Yoga is really, really helpful. For those of you who have never done yoga before, you want to start, do some beginner's yoga, hit YouTube. YouTube will be your best friend. You can find some really great videos there and just stretch it out. Stretch it out, release that tension. Remember to breathe. Some really good breathing exercises help. And even though right now we can't be face to face with each other, that's why I had my guest remote for number one. Since we can't be face to face with each other, even if you have to call a friend and really talk about everything that's going on, even that helps. That
Mhm.
helps a lot. Um, if you have a therapist like I do, your life is probably already saved because my therapist literally gets me through every single week. Um, but just general mindfulness practices. And one of the things that I want to say, just in general, beyond racial trauma, beyond COVID-19, is sometimes it's really helpful to look inward. There's a lot that goes on externally. There's a lot going on in the world, in politics, where they local, national, whatever, we're all going through something. We all have this shared experience right now, but internally in Audreyonna Sequale's little bubble, things could actually be okay. I'm thankful that I'm able to wake up every morning. I'm thankful that I'm healthy and that my family and friends are healthy and things like that, and it's easy to say, oh, well, focus on the positive, but it really does help, to kind of like look inside your own bubble. Maya, I'm sure you have some really great things that's, probably going on in your world and things that you can focus on to say that, everything outside kind of sucks right now, but internally inside, I'm okay. I'm all right. You're in the process of, getting your education. You were on this really dope podcast today. You got to, share your knowledge and everything, so little things like that just kind of remind yourself that, like, yes, things are going to happen in the world. Yes, racial
Right.
trauma does exist, but inside, internally, because honestly, that's all we can control is ourselves. That's kind of something that I like to look forward to. But
Right.
do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think we really, unpacked a lot, and it's a lot to, unpack more.
Hmm.
If we have, I think we did a great job tonight, and I just want to encourage everyone to, like, you said, to be more positive. Everything's going on in the world right now, but kind of come in with yourself and figure out what makes you happy during this time and do those things so you can, decrease stress and you can have some level of enjoyment. And I think it's very important that for moments like this, unexpected moments like this, that we know how to, find enjoyment with ourselves. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, just have ourselves sometimes. And with everything going on and not being able to connect, not being able to have face to face interaction, which is very important in Black culture, together, have a good time. We also have to know how to, do things when it becomes,
Hmm.
risky. So,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Well, you guys, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing on up. But before I do, you know what? I think at the end of my episodes, I'm going to start doing takeaways like my therapist does because I want to make sure that y'all come away with something. So, first of all, you guys, just to kind of out what we were saying, racial trauma does exist. It does. I know that there is still a lot of science that's being done behind it, the science of epigenetics. But you, as a Black person, we know what we go through. We know what we've been through, and we know how it has affected us from your great grandmama on down to you. We know that. So racial trauma does exist. There are ways that society, from healthcare to housing to, the workplace, just a whole bunch of different ways that society has failed us as Black folks. Shout out again to Dr. Wilder for giving, those statistics about, Black women, Black women and their birth mortality, really, really upsetting information, but things that we have to know. There are so many different ways that trauma presents itself in our culture. And I think that the most important thing for us to do is acknowledge it and give it a name, and then to do something about it. Please, Black people, do not be afraid of therapy. I will always, always tell people the couch changed my life. The couch saved my life. If you can, again, I know that there are barriers to therapy, but please try to find some help if you can. In just a minute, I'll actually give you some links and resources for that. Um, but the fourth thing I want to say is notice the ways in which trauma affects your body, where you're holding and storing, all of that, um, pent up stress. Make sure you're releasing it, and find ways to just focus on the good. And I know that that's like, yeah, so that's your little happy ending, that's your little silver lining or whatever. But I mean, at least, and I don't want us to, just be miserable together, but at least that it's something that we are all experiencing. At least it's something that you're not alone with. And because of that, it's easier to talk about now. We brought it to the forefront, and I really would encourage you guys to keep this conversation going, in your friend groups, with your family, or whoever, even after this episode is over. But that's enough of our wrap up. So I want to go ahead and give you, Maya, a chance to plug yourself and where we can find you.
Okay, you definitely can find me on Instagram at Maya the Advocate. That's my platform that I'm working on as far as mental health and self awareness and self care. And you can also contact me if you need to at mlwilliams557@gmail.com on a different, email for my mental health page. But those are two places you can contact me at. And thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Of course. Thank you so much for coming by. I think this was an amazing conversation. I'm glad that I got to have it at this time with more eyes and ears on the show. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for rocking with, this show for an hour. Thank you for rocking with us the whole week. Thank you to my producer, Al P, for putting this on and for getting this technology together, because all I can do is talk on the mic and supply the questions. That's all I got. But other than that, you guys, you can find me, well, you can find the show in two places. You can find us on Instagram at Strong Friend Check-In. You can also find me on Twitter at Strong Friend Pod, POD. You can also follow my blog / personal page on Instagram at authentically_ASB. And please, please, please subscribe to my blog at authenticallyasb.com. While you're at authenticallyasb.com, where I said I had something to share with you guys, if you go to authenticallyasb.com and go to the resources page, I do have a few local and national resources for those of you who are interested in possibly starting therapy. So definitely go ahead and check that out. If there are any, therapists locally or nationally who are listening, I am always open to adding more to that list. So definitely contact me, any of these places. Let's see what else. Yes, you can find this show. You can find Strong Friend Check-In in a number of places. Number one being Buzzsprout. Just search Strong Friend Check-In and Buzzsprout, I should come right up. Download your favorite episodes. Go back and listen from the very beginning. I have literally been doing this for a year now. I can't believe it. So that's pretty awesome. Yay! Thank you, Pete, in the background. Yeah, I've been doing this for nearly a year, and it's just like, whoa, my Instagram had to remind me. Yes, download those episodes. I should also be up on Spotify, Apple Music, Google, not Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and shortly iHeartRadio. So you can check me out in all of those different locations, but definitely please support the show, support all shows of our neighborhood here, MPN Management. But again, thank you so much to you guys watching and listening. Thank you to my guest Maya. Thank you to Dr. Wilder. This was an absolutely amazing conversation. Like I said, I wanted to have it since day one. I'm glad that I got two really good people to have it with. But that is it for this week's episode of Strong Friend Check-In. I will check you guys out later, okay? So stay tuned for the rest of the Fly Socks and Tees virtual festival, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.